Hello, welcome to the With Parents podcast. My name is Jason Gant. I'm the pastor of kids and families here at Church of the Resurrection. I'm so glad you tuned in. Today is going to be a very meaningful, even transforming interview. I'm talking with Susie Gurley. You may have heard of the Just a Mom podcast. If you haven't, go follow it right now because she's just a mom. She's not a professional this or that, but she cares. She had a personal experience that led her to a mission to make mental health and mental wellness a part of our normalized day and vernacular so that we can make a difference in lives of kids who are suffering from depression or anxiety and suicidal ideation. You don't want to miss this. It's important. It is meaningful. Let's get into it. Susie, we are so glad you're here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Jason, so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Susie Gurley, and I have lived in the Kansas City area for over 20 years now, and I'm married to my husband, Dan Gurley, and we met in college.
Sweethearts.
Yep, college sweethearts. Went to TCU, go Frogs. Always got to get my frogs in. We have 3 children. They are all grown now, but our oldest is Jeff, and he's married to Madison. Our daughter, Olivia, is married to Nick, and our youngest, Will, is engaged, newly engaged.
And this is something to celebrate,
yes,
right?
It is very much something to celebrate. So his bride-to-be is Kaylee. So,
oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And Susie, part of why you're here today is because you have the Just a Mom podcast.
Right.
I was a friend shared and pointed me toward your podcast. I went and checked it all out, and I thought, this is such an important story and an important message. I want to point every parent, individual, teenager, anyone toward what you're trying to do, because really it's an act of courage. It's an act of transparency. It's a response to really a call on your heart. And I'd love for you to tell us just tell us about the Just a Mom podcast before we get into the why.
Sure.
But tell us about it.
Thank you so much. Yes, so the Just a Mom podcast I started, launched in September of 2022. And what I do is I work to help people know that they are not alone and that there is hope. And I do that by sharing stories. I talk to parents who have kids with mental health issues. Yeah. I talk to people with lived experience, adults, kids alike. And I also, once I found out pretty early on that most of us did not know what to do or who to call when our child had a mental health crisis, because of that, I started incorporating mental health resources and professionals into the podcast. So that's a little bit about the Just a Mom podcast. And I call it the Just a Mom podcast because I am not a mental health professional. Right. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist. I'm just a mom.
Just a mom, which I'm going to say right now is not just anything. Moms are critical. Parents are critical. Sure. Thank you for really this conviction, but it's also very personal for you. And I want you to tell us about that. And I want to say right out front, I just appreciate your transparency. And you talk about that's really critical, that we start to be able to have these conversations. And so I just appreciate you leading the way. So tell us why this started for you.
So it started because of what our son, Will, that I just told you about, who's now engaged, because of his personal battle with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. This started almost 7 years ago, and we had no idea that he was struggling until we got a call from the school counselor that Will had reached out for help. And we were shocked. We had no clue. We felt like failures as parents because we didn't know that he was struggling. And he was in pretty bad shape. He had been self-harming. Again, we had no idea. So we hopped into action, and that was the beginning of months and months of multiple therapy appointments a week, meeting with a psychiatrist for medication, also intensive outpatient treatment, and a lot of hard work on Will's part in his journey to health.
Well, I love you called it a journey, and I love that because I feel like that's a really good, and because you were on it together. Yeah. He wasn't alone in this, and that's part of what you wanted him to know as his mom.
Yes.
Right? You wanted him to know you're there.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine how difficult this was because there's so much unknowns, and that's part of what the challenge with mental health right now is. We're in a crisis.
Yes.
Coming out of COVID, we have generational crisis.
Yes.
And we still aren't talking about it enough. We're not learning enough. We're not understanding enough. And so part of your conviction out of your own personal journey. So excited to hear about Will's continual growth and doing really well and passions around the arts and theater, and just so glad that you guys responded. And but I also understand. You said something about how you felt like a failure.
Sure.
Right. And I feel like I think I could identify with that. Right. I have two daughters, 17 and 15, and I don't want to fail them. Right.
Yeah,
I want
right.
to be the best for them. I want to take care of them. I want to protect them. Walk us through how that felt just as a mom when all that happened.
All right, I'll never forget it. We were actually out of town. Dan and I were celebrating our 25th anniversary, and I could picture the hotel room where we were sitting when that call came in, and just I'm sure my mouth was on the floor, and I'm thinking, "Are you sure you've got the right person? This can't really be happening." And just that pit in your stomach, when you feel like you got punched in the gut, and what in the world is going on, and how bad is it, and all that kind of thing. And it just was a very helpless feeling.
Yes.
I wouldn't say hopeless, but helpless, where initially we just didn't really know what to do again to help him. And thankfully we started making phone calls and were able to really mobilize some help pretty quickly.
I love how you say you didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Felt helpless, but not hopeless. That's, wow, what a statement. Certainly that plays into your faith. I know that you are a person of faith and a person of hope. But then the best part for me is you took action. You immediately said, we're going to do whatever we're going to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think any of us would do that,
Sure.
right? What are we going to do to care for our kids?
Yes.
But you've taken it further. You've taken it further than most people might in this situation. Now, tell us how it moved from just being your family's story and your family's journey into this movement of Just a Mom.
Yeah. Well, ironically, Will is the one who led the way on that. Part of Will's healing journey was his starting the You Matter Festival in 2018. He was inspired by watching the Grammys and seeing Logic perform the 1-800 Suicide Prevention Lifeline song that year. And he thought, well, he's using his platform to help people. I love music and performing, and I could do something like that to help the kids here in our area, the teenagers and the students who are struggling as well. He was 14 at the time, and he came to us with this idea. And initially we thought, oh, well, we'll set some chairs up in the backyard and invite our friends over, and you can play your music and we'll call it good. But he had a much bigger idea. And a few months later, we are standing at the Blue Valley High School Stadium watching 1,000 people pour in for this first annual You Matter Festival. And Dan and I kind of looked at each other and said, I think he's onto something here.
Yes.
And that was the first of, I think we had 5 or 6 festivals before Will kind of moved into a different direction. But and thousands of people impacted by the You Matter Festival because Will felt compelled to share his story and to do something to help other people who might have some of the same struggles. And because he did that, he hired a professional sound company, and we said, well, you're going to have to raise some money to pay for that. And he did, and so he started meeting with different people and organizations to raise the money to pay for the company. And one of those people was a parent who'd lost a child to suicide a couple of years prior to that. And I had taken Will to the meeting because he couldn't drive yet, and went in with him. And while I had to that point been a little hesitant, no, I'm not going to lie, I was a lot hesitant about Will sharing his story because I still was worried about being judged as a bad mom. How did this happen to your kid? Because, well, what did his mom do? And so I was concerned about that. And when we sat down and met with this mom, all I could think was what she wouldn't do to be sitting in my position, where my son was sitting next to me and her son wasn't and never would be. And that shifted my mind permanently. that day. And from then on, I was the biggest cheerleader behind the scenes, taking Will to interviews with TV stations and things like that. He became somewhat of a local teen spokesperson for mental health after that first You Matter festival. And part of that was doing an interview for 0 Reasons Why, which is a local organization that probably a lot of your families are familiar with.
It's a movement here, a combined school systems in Johnson County that we're hoping to share stories and to offer suicide prevention.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, so they asked Will to do a video, and I drove him to do that again. And while we were there, they asked me if I would do one, and I said, well, I don't know that I have anything to say. I'm just a mom, and I don't really know much, but I guess, yeah, exactly, just a mom. And they said, no, we'd really like to interview you. You know, we don't have a lot of parents who've done this. And so I said, okay, and did it and sort of forgot about it. And then a few months later, when they posted it, my husband was scrolling Facebook one night, and he said, hey, they posted your video, and oh, wow, it's been seen 10,000 times. Wow. And I was like, okay. And he said, that's a lot. You need to think about doing something with this, because whatever it was that you said really struck a nerve.
It struck, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it wasn't necessarily what I said. It was that I was talking about it.
Right. And I think because people could relate to you. Because when I look at you, Susie, I feel like you're the same place we are in life. You're trying to figure out parenting. Yeah. You're not an expert per se, but you care and love your kids, and you want the best for them. You want to figure out how to pathway through this. I hope that's what a lot of the viewers and listeners now will see. Hey, this was just a mom. I love that you titled it that. There's it's almost like a place of humility to show like, hey, that's all you need is to be just a mom. And I just love that. So you started this podcast, and you decided on a podcast, right? You were kind of trying to figure out a way to message, a way to speak.
Right.
How did that come about?
Well, again, my husband had a lot to do with this. He's the 40,000-foot guy. He has all the big ideas, and he's like, you need to think about doing, a blog or something. And then he said, I think you should do a podcast. And I was like, a podcast? I mean, I can barely turn the computer on, just to be clear. No, I'm not joking. I'm so not techie, but the more we talked about it and I thought about it and prayed about it, it was, a podcast makes so much sense because it's free, it's accessible, and it's such a great medium for storytelling. And I think there's such power in stories. And I mean, just like what we're doing today, it's sharing a story. I wanted
people to hear your story.
Yes, because people can relate to stories. They can pick out parts that are like, oh, I know exactly what that feels like because I have felt that too. So that was the beginning of the Just a Mom podcast idea, and I dragged my feet on it for a little while. I kept thinking, oh, surely not me, God. There's somebody definitely more qualified, better, smarter, etc. And for whatever reason, God just would not let me say no. And so the first episode launched in September of 2022, and we're now in our 5th season of interviews and episodes, and it's just been an incredible experience for me.
That's wonderful, and I just applaud your courage in all of this and through all of this, and that you're telling everybody your story so transparently. Susie, that's going to help the rest of us drop the stigma of conversation around mental health and response to mental health. And I love that you referenced the whole, I kind of dragged my feet. And, if you're not a Christian and if you're new to faith, the Bible's filled with stories just like that. Yep. where God shows us a way and we're hesitant. We often, in fact, there's great leaders in the Bible that just offer excuse after excuse as to why not. And
that was me.
But yet there was a moment, and you have now, you're following that call. This is now part of the journey for you, and you've interviewed some great interviews, and that's what I want our listeners to hear. I want them to go, and I want them to follow and listen and listen to some of the great insights that you've learned, because it's going to help us. Earlier Susie said to me, her hope is, and I was sharing with her something I recently learned, that there was a survey done by Barna where young moms who are a part of a church named that the one thing they wish their church would do better, that their church wasn't doing well, was offering guidance when it came to mental health and wellness. And that's what we're trying to do. I was affirmed that that's the direction we're trying to be here at Resurrection. I know many other churches are doing that. Well done. Let's keep doing it. But I just remember you said, gosh, I want every young mom to hear that. I wish I had heard that.
Yes.
And, that wasn't talked about.
Nope, it was not. And, our kids are 21 to 26 years old, and they absolutely was not being talked about societally, much less at the church. And so it's great to see that starting to shift. I think that our churches still have a long way to go.
We have a long way to go.
But I love that churches are starting to really press into mental health, as opposed to, not that long ago, churches were giving the opposite message of,
So true.
There's
So
true. Something wrong with your mother if you have a mental illness. And, you wouldn't say that to someone whose child had cancer or diabetes. And mental health is all part of our health. It's just
Right. We need to
disease in
think
the
of
brain.
mental health just like every other part of our physical health, like going to the dentist, going to the eye doctor, that's just another part of our health, proactive health care, mental health. And there's so much that continues to point to mental health, as if we work on that, our souls grow, our health holistically, right? There's just such great learning in there and so much to discover. And let me say this, if you're a person who has been hurt by the church in any way, let us confess that the church is made up of humans and we need to get better. And we need to rely on God, and we need to rely on God's good gift of science to in incredible ways help our young people especially, but anyone in mental health needs. And here at Resurrection, we make that a priority in our counseling area, our therapeutic area. We have an incredible counseling ministry that's confidential, scholarships available, specialties in family, marriage, adolescent. Just know that we're available for you. You can reach out to me really or any way through our church. We want to be that type of church along with many others in our area. So just know we're here for you. We want to get better at this. And you're helping us lead the way in that, Susie, and I just love that. I'd love that. I had thought about some of the compelling interviews you've had. Were there any that really stuck out that just were really insightful or inspiring or meaningful to you as you've walked through these interviews?
There are so many. All of them are special because these lovely people who are entrusting me to share their very personal, difficult, oftentimes journey. And I'm so appreciative to the parents, the people with lived experience who have done that and are doing that, as well as these brilliant experts that I have had the good fortune to have on the Just a Mom podcast to help us learn what do we do if and when our child or our loved one has a mental health crisis. So I think it would be hard for me to say one in particular because I've learned something, at least one something, multiple somethings usually from every single conversation I've had for the Just a Mom podcast. And I'm, like I said, just so thankful that people are willing to be vulnerable and open and share their stories.
Well, I love that you're inviting them to share their story. You're giving a platform to share their story. So it's not only for your own personal knowledge and well-being, but you're sharing it with the community and that anyone would have it. And that to me, that's a mission.
Yeah.
I said to you earlier, I said, I think you are fulfilling a mission. There's a call on your life, and this is an opportunity to change the world.
Well, I don't know about the world, but, maybe just my little, microcosm here. I hope that, if I can help one person, truly, one person feel differently about mental health, shed some of the stigma, then I would say mission accomplished. Obviously, I hope that it helps a lot more than one person.
Yes.
But even if one is what's helped, then I'm glad to have been able to be a small part of that.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I know as you're thinking about these interviews you've done and this platform, I know it's already bigger than you imagined and it's not what you envisioned, but you're starting to be able to speak at different conferences and things. We didn't even talk about that, but I saw some of that on your site and share your thoughts. I think your voice is important because you're not a professional psychotherapist, because you might not be a professional counselor or social worker. And I think the title says it all, the Just a Mom.
Yeah.
And you said, so I wanted to give you some final words because I thought when you gave this wisdom to me, I thought it was brilliant. But would you share some of those closing thoughts?
Sure. Again, I hope that people feel like when they listen to the Just a Mom podcast that they are not alone and there is hope.
Yes.
And that's what I hope to share through a lot of these conversations that I've had the privilege of having. And I also cannot wait for the day that someone doesn't call Will or me courageous for being willing to share our stories. I look forward to that. I look forward to the mental health conversation being so normalized that no one says, oh, you have so much courage to do this.
Thanks for saying that, because that is exactly the goal. We will know then it's a part of our cultural vernacular. It's a part of, we've put the stigmas aside, we've put the fears and the unknowns aside, and we're always afraid of what we don't know because we've learned enough, we've studied enough, we've desired to make a difference. And you said something to me I don't want this to miss, because these were her words, which was just is more than enough.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very powerful statement.
Yeah. And God made us enough for whatever comes our way, including a mental health problem with a child or a family member, a loved one. And made us enough to reach out, ask for help, talk to even one trusted friend about
Just
what's
talk
going
to one
on.
Friend. Right. And again, we want to be here for you. You don't have to be a part of our church. You don't have to have ever worshiped here. We want to be a resource for you in this community. Reach out to us. Certainly go out and follow right away the Just a Mom podcast. You can hear more from Susie as she shares her heart. It is genuine. It is powerful. It is transparent. And yes, it is courageous. And one day, my hope is it's completely normalized.
Yes.
That is such a great vision. And you're setting that vision, and we're going to jump on board with you in the way that goes. So thanks so much for being here today and being a part of the With Parents podcast.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity.